So, welcome to my blog. My name is Arnav Tiwari, and today I'm joined here with my grandfather. Now, Buddhism is a topic that has interested several people through the course of history, and especially over the past 70 to 80 years. Today, Baba here will be talking to us, and especially me, about the rise of Buddhism through history and how it has affected life even today. All right, Baba. So I wanted to start off by asking you, what was Gautam Buddha's early life like? How did he rise in popularity, and how did Buddhism rise as a religion or as an ideology later on?
Yeah, these are several questions, so they have to be answered differently. First, about the life of Buddha. So, as I said, uh, Buddhism was a 6th century BC religion that was 500 years before Jesus Christ and around 2500 years before now. Now, Buddhism was a great reformist movement of its time. It was surely not a mainstream faith. It went against lots of the established belief systems of those days. Uh, how Buddha came to become Buddha, there is a story to it. Now, Buddha's real name was Siddhartha Gautama, and he was born to King Suddhodan and Queen Maya Devi, who ruled over Kapilavastu, which is in modern day Nepal. Suddhodan was a king who was a typical king of those days. He was the leader of the Sakya clan, and he wanted his son to succeed him and make uh, his empire even bigger than what Suddhodan himself had made. The story goes that when Maya Devi was pregnant with Siddhartha Gautama, she found an elephant enter her body in a dream. And the priests were called, and the priests declared to the king that a very great soul was going to be born as his son, who would either become a great emperor, a Chakravarti Samrat, as they call it, or would become a great preacher. So Suddhodan became alarmed. He didn't want his only son to become a preacher or take to the life of sannyasis, or as they call mendicancy. He didn't want him to become a mendicant. Therefore, he surrounded him with all manner of pleasures, and he created a virtual wall between him and the world. So that is how Buddha lived in palaces in the midst of great luxury, surrounded by servants, not allowed to see the actual world and its many miseries. Suddhodan believed that if he kept Buddha away from the uh, realities of the world, he might not be moved enough to leave the life he was living and going for the life which was outside the boundaries of the palace. But Gautam was a curious child. He kept on asking questions. Why life? And like all young children do. So it would appear that when he was 16 years old, he was married off to a princess called, her name was Yashodhara. And they soon had a child. His name was Rahul. And then, but his mind was always wandering. He was not able to confine his energies inside the four walls of the palace. He had a friend and a charioteer whose name was Channa. So it appears that Gautam one day asked Channa, uh, why could he not give him a ride through the city of Kapilavastu? So Channa was first reluctant because the king had forbidden any type of contact with Buddha and the realities of worldly life. But one day, I don't know, they say he was motivated by some divine inspiration. He picked up his chariot, made Gautam to sit in it, and early in the morning they moved. So there were four sights which Gautam saw. He saw a, an old man, a sick man, a dead body, and a monk. He saw four sights. So these four sights made a great imprint on his mind. First, he saw an old man. He had never seen an old man because Sudhodan had made sure that nothing that was decrepit or decaying should be in his sight. So he asked Channa who this is. He said, Prince, he is an old man. He said, what is old? And he says, when you get on years, the body becomes shriveled, it loses its energy and vitality. That is when the old age sets in. That is the future of every soul that is born. So old age is inescapable. Buddha asked Channa, can somebody escape old age? He said, no. If you live long enough, you will not escape old age. And the only way one escapes old age is to die early. Then next he saw a sick man. He asked him, why was that man groaning in pain and why was he so pale and weak? The answer Channa gave was, he's a sick man. He said, what is sickness? Channa explained to him that sickness was an affliction of body by disease, which ravages the body. And it can lead to the body's decay or even to death. He went ahead and then he saw a dead body. He said, what is dead body? He said, he's a dead man who is being taken for cremation. So Buddha said, what is death? And Channa explains to him that anybody who is born is bound to die. It is only, and that appointed time of death is already preordained. Gautam was extremely troubled by those sights. He started asking, what is the purpose of birth? If inevitably it leads to old age, sickness, and death. Then he saw a monk. So he asked Channa who that person was. Channa told him that he was a monk. He said, what is monk? He said, monks are those who have abandoned the world, they leave the world and they go away in search of truth and of God. They have no attachments. They're free from all ties, of all worldly ties. So all these four factors were working on his mind. So he came back to his palace and he was not the same man again. His mind was asking fundamental questions about life. He started wondering where to find those answers. There was no one to give him the answers. He went to gurus, to rishis, to people who were very knowledgeable, and nobody was able to give him the answer about why this kind of decay happens in body. So one day, he decided that he would find that answers himself. So what he did was, one night when Yashodhara and her child were sleeping, he left the palace. He asked Channa to ride him through the town and leave him in the forest. Where he went, he shaved off his head. He gave away all his princely clothes to Channa, put on a mendicant's clothing, and he went in search of truth. So the belief in those days was that if you starve your body, if you if you torture your body, you will one day gain enlightenment.
Mm.
So he started torturing his body. He starved his body. He tortured his body. He sat down in the midst of burning fire when in high summer, and he stood in water in high winter just to experience torture of body. But he found he was getting nothing in sight. So one day he went and sat down under a peepal tree, Bodhi tree, and said, I will not get up from here till I have come to realize the truth. He sat there for many days. And then one day he had enlightenment. Nobody knows what that enlightenment was, who gave that enlightenment to him, how it came to him. Because Buddha did not believe in God.
Mhm.
Buddha didn't believe in God. If he didn't believe in God, who gave the enlightenment to him? Is it auto-generated enlightenment? That this enlightenment is already in the body, in the mind, and you only need to activate that particular spot which get whether that happened or some external force gave him enlightenment, that is unknown. But Buddha emerged for the first time. Gautam had become Buddha
All right.
under the Bodhi tree. So the story goes that after he became Buddha, he received some sweet dish from a woman in the nearby village. Some kheer was fed to him, and then he gave his first lecture, first discourse on his philosophy of life to 5 disciples. The chief among them was Anand, who remained his chief disciple all through his life. So there, Buddha gave to them some of the basic truths, which later on became the bedrock on which Buddhism stood. He said that life is sorrow. Sorrow is because of desire. Desire leads to sorrow. Desire is on account of attachments. So these 3 factors are the inevitable result of being born. It is not exceptional to human. It is true of all that is there in the universe. The universe itself is perishable. Only the timings differ from a moment to billions of years, but end is inevitable. So Buddha was suddenly talking about a cosmic reality and relating that cosmic reality to human existence. So for the first time, there was this is also the idea of the Vedas, that you are not individual soul, you are part of the cosmic soul. You don't know it because there is something called Maya, which separates you from realizing your true identity. So Buddha interpreted it differently, but godlessly. There was no God in it. He propounded the theory of karma. He says there is reincarnation. One who is born, you keep on reincarnating because the desires don't die out. Desire are the cause not only of pain, but also the cause of reincarnation and rebirth. So because he said that life is sorrow, each birth is sorrow. And trying to avoid that sorrow becomes the purpose of life. How do you avoid that sorrow? That is what the teaching Buddha gave to the world. So he said that you must do what is known as sat karma. You must do the right, you must have the right attitude, the right conduct, the right belief, all that he said. Now, if these things become part of your life, then you may escape this circle of life and death, life, death, death and rebirth, which each one of them is the reason for your sorrow. So life is sorrow, and escaping that life is escaping sorrow. That life can be escaped only by loosening your attachments, lowering your desires, and that lowers your unhappiness and sorrow. Then he said that you cannot become wise or happy by taking some other life. Therefore, ahimsa, non-violence, which Gandhi later on adopted, became the core value of Buddhism. He says, if your life is sorrow, what business have you got to inflict sorrow on other life by taking it? Buddha was extremely logical. Many people describe him as the first religious scientist of the world, the first metaphysical scientist.
All right.
He said, he did not say that you believe in metaphysics. He says, nothing which your senses don't tell you is true, you should accept. So he relied on your hearing, on your touch, and on your eyesight in order to know the truth. This is what the modern science is all about.
Yes.
You experiment, you see, you hear, you touch, you taste, and from that to deduce the truth. Buddha brought this idea of testing truth through the faculties given to human beings as a metaphysical concept of his belief system. That was a great departure from Hinduism.
All right.
So, in a sense, Buddha was teaching sorrow, ahimsa, karma, reincarnation and rebirth, and all this can be resolved through right conduct, right belief, right approach, right path. This can lead to the end of your sorrow, hence to what he called nirvana. The concept of nirvana was again central to Buddhism. That is liberation from sorrow and liberation from the cycle of birth and death. That is how this was rudimentary Buddhism, right? But this became the core value system of contemporary India. He was a great traveler. He moved from place to place. He hardly stayed in one place. And he went to each village, and he went to 3 houses every day to take what is known as to beg, bhiksha, to take, and householders waited for Buddha to come to their house to take bhiksha.
Yes.
And the house he went to considered itself lucky and fortunate. So they were waiting for him to come to take bhiksha. So he never waited for tomorrow. He lived all his life without wait, because they say that expectation of tomorrow creates sorrow again. So in order to detach yourself even from your expectations. So that is how Buddhism built its edifice of philosophy.
It's brilliant. Now, I was saying, can we call Buddhism the ideology of reality? Maybe because...
Surely we can, because Buddhism First, Buddhism was a form of agnosticism.
Yes.
Agnosticism is that which believe only in what is.
Mhm.
They did not go into the metaphysical questions about whether there is God, whether there is no God. Buddha was posed this question many a time. He was asked, is there God? And he remained quiet. He never gave that answer. So Buddha has never clearly expounded on God. He never said, I am God. Unlike Jesus Christ, who said, I am Son of God. Buddha never said that. He only said, I have realized certain truths. And that realization he was sharing with the rest of the world.
All right.
Later on, the kings adopted Buddhism, like Ashoka, that was in the 3rd century BC. He adopted Buddhism. And Ashoka is principally credited with spreading Buddhism as a faith among Indians. Later on, there were other great philosophers and propagators of Hinduism like Nagarjuna. He became about 150 years after the birth of Buddha, there was a great schism in Buddhism. Schism is when a faith splits into two.
All right.
So there were two branches born, Hinayana and Mahayana. Yana is the vehicle. So these were philosophical vehicles to take forward the teachings of Buddha. The Hinayana is an older knowledge branch of Buddhism.
Yes.
It is more on mendicancy, it is more on abrogation of attachments, it is more about withdrawing. And actually, Hinayana, in that sense, is closer to Jainism. Mahayana, it believes in worship, in offering ritualistic chants. And Mahayana became the dominant faith in northern part of the country and Central Asia, and even China in those days.
Yes.
And that was on account of, they say, the great teachers like Nagarjuna. And later on, in later years, great universities of Buddhist teaching came up. Nalanda, for example, was a Buddhist school, Buddhist university. India had about 11 universities in the 6th century BC when you know what was happening to the rest of the world. So Buddhism was a great repository of knowledge, largely because that was the first faith which was basing its arguments about faith on scientific values, on logic, on disputation, on perception, on seeing, believing, touching, knowing. So Buddha was supposed to be the first scientist of metaphysics.
All right. I see. And one more question, and then the last, of course. Now, do you think an ideology similar to Buddhism, professing peace and serenity, was inevitable through the course of history? And do you think its rise was inevitable through the course of history?
Obviously, I suppose so, because Buddhism was not alone in those days. In 6th century BC, as I said, two great religions were born.
Yes.
Buddhism and Jainism. Jainism has a similar emphasis on ahimsa, on non-violence,
Yes.
on a belief system based upon surrender, non-attachment. That is also Jainism. And non-sacrifice, not taking out life, taking life, on simplicity. So uh, both religions were supposed to be uh, a response to the decay and degradation which was happening in contemporary Brahmanism.
Huh.
So, and both religions don't believe in difference between humans. All humans were equal. They believe in human equality. So that was it in 6th century BC, where society was so stratified, where the Shudras, as they know, the last class of people, Brahmin said that even their shadow should not fall on a caste Brahmin. Even a shadow of a Shudra would make a Brahmin polluted. The Shudras would be allowed to live only outside the villages. And before entering the village, in order to serve the community, they have to announce through a bell that they were entering the village. So that was the type of degradation which the contemporary Brahmanism had imposed upon the fourth class of the society, the third class, the Shudras. And both Jainism and Buddhism said no, nobody can be Shudra or Brahmin or on account of birth. Therefore, they brought in this revolutionary concept of equality of individual. Much before the American Declaration of Independence, all men are equal. They believed in equality. So there were people of all castes with Buddha. And there were several parables about Buddha where he goes and dines in the house of Sudras, Shudra women. He allows the dacoits who were of the Shudra class to become his principal devotee. So, by conduct, by teaching, and by inspiring, Buddha was trying to change not only those who followed him, but the society in general.
All right.
So, you can say surely that the type of ideas which Buddhism was bringing forward in 6th century BC was to revolutionize society and to bring in new values into its
I
mess.
think answering my own question, we can also say the rise of similar thoughts during the 20th century, during the Indian freedom movement, uh, that were professed by Gandhi, that may have also been inspired by Gautam Buddha's thoughts, mirror Buddhism and Jainism's ideologies. And then we can say that the rise of an ideology was not inevitable or was
Yes,
inevitable.
Vita. The
Yeah.
concept of non-discrimination
Mhm.
based upon birth, the concept of empathy for humans and for all life, and the concept of ahimsa.
Yes.
These simple sounding concepts were actually revolutionary.
Mhm.
They changed the way the society conducted itself. And from Ashoka's time, these ideas changed the concept of kingship.
Yes.
The king as the ruler and the king as the father of his subjects. Ashoka, for example, described himself as a parent to his subjects,
Yes.
and his subjects had rights over him. This concept was born out of his affiliation to Buddhism. So, Buddhism's impact was not only timeless, it influenced several people in several generations, including Gandhi.
Yes.
But it also brought about a change in the concept of kingship in later years.
All right. And do you think history or the course of history and even modern and even society today could be changed if Buddhism did not exist or ideologies like Buddhism did not exist?
Now, Buddhism is a very popular form of religion in the world.
Yeah.
Actually, uh, uh, Buddhism in India has been again overtaken by Hinduism. But in Sri Lanka, in Burma, in Indonesia, in Thailand, most of the Southeast Asia, Japan, Laos, then you have in China, in Central Asia, in parts of Russia, Buddhism was a very dominant faith. In fact, it was the only faith.
Mhm.
So Mahayana Buddhism, the southern Buddhism was Hinayana. That is the Buddhism of Sri Lanka and Burma is mostly Hinayana Buddhism. Northern Buddhism, that is Central Asian Buddhism and Southeast Asian Buddhism, it is essentially Mahayana because they were all influenced by Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna was born incidentally in Andhra Pradesh. One dam is named after him called Nagarjuna Sagar. So he was a great teacher, great debater. The process by which the ideas of Buddha were carried forward were through disputations. So, so Buddhism became more popular outside India than in India because Hinduism fought back.
Yes.
After the Maurya Empire collapsed within 50 years of Ashoka's death, the new kings were more Hindu kings. So it was Hinduism recaptured its lost territory, and in the process reformed itself. There are lots of things which Hinduism adopted were on account of Buddha's teaching. So one of the greatest thinkers of Hinduism, Adi Shankaracharya, the first Shankaracharya, was also called uh, camouflaged Buddha, Prachanna Buddha,
Ah.
camouflaged Buddha.
Mhm.
He was lost. So Buddha was influencing everything. It was not as if he was only for the Buddhist. His influence was so radical. His ideas were so radical and so influential that they they were adopted by a larger society than just the Buddhist.
Huh. All right. All right. So, Baba, that answers all of my questions. Thank you for getting onto this,
Thank you.
helping me
Thank
out.
you.
Until next time.